We are live. I usually wait for a few people
All right.
to jump in, and I can see some people are dropping in already. Nice. Hello, Mark. Hello, Gianluca. Awesome. All right. Well, let's just jump right into it, I guess. So I'm here with Dan Bach, who runs a really great chess newsletter, Chess Improvement Lab. Really interesting, really thoughtful. So he's someone who I would say takes a very well considered approach to chess improvement and has some results to back it up because I believe you went from what was it Dan, like 1500 to 1900 plus, in your 40s.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
he's got a really interesting post about that. But we're going to be talking more about today is then in the past year, the rating progress kind of slowed down, had a step back, a step forward, a bit of a plateau. So we're talking
Yep.
about plateaus and setbacks, what that means, how to do, does it mean anything? Do you need to change anything? How do you deal with that? So that's going to be the topic for today. So welcome, Dan.
Yeah. Thanks. And I apologize to anyone who's tuning in expecting to see like a famous grandmaster or something, and they found it's whose name got on the live stream this week. Oh, it's some random guy whose rating went up and went down. Um, but I'm looking forward to talking about plateaus and setbacks.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I mean, we've got some grandmasters too, but I think people are interested in, players who have like walked the walk in terms of adult improvement because it's really not that common. Certainly a
yeah.
4 point jump as an adult is not common at all.
Yeah, I have a success story to share, and I have um, some and some failures also since then. So
Okay, well, let's shout out to Nick, by the way. I just my Ninja Creamy ice cream maker just got here, so I'm experimenting with that. He sent me a recipe. But okay, well, let's start with the success. So,
all right,
you had this period of, pretty rapid sustained rating growth. So maybe you can talk a little bit about like what were you doing? What do you attribute that to? Were you doing anything unusual maybe to achieve that?
yeah. So a, I came back to chess. I was not a beginner in 2020, late 2021, early 2022, when I um, decided to come back. I had played when I was younger. Um, I took a long break off OTB chess. I was playing aimless blitz and bullet online um, during that time, and always sort of had it in the back of my head that um, I might take this seriously again, like I did when I was younger, and like I analyze my games and read books and not just play aimless blitz and bullet. And eventually uh, made the decision to do that. And at the beginning of 2022, when my rating was in the 1500s. And I think the first step there was a sense of perspective because I was not a beginner. I was not brand new to this, and I had had a period of adult improvement earlier, about 18 years earlier in my 20s, when I had I had come back. I had tried to take the game more seriously than I had when I was a teenager, and had a lot of difficulty. I found it. Um, I found it very difficult, and I had that perspective in mind when I came back, and I thought, "I'm not expecting anything for 6 months. I'm just gonna play as much as I can. I'm gonna analyze my games. I'm gonna figure out what my weaknesses are, and I am not expecting anything in terms of, like, ratings gains, um, for, uh, for at least 6 months and maybe longer." And so I think that was pretty important. I think that, um, I see people come to chess and uh, they 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 want to improve. They start, and improvement's relatively easy when you're a beginner because you're starting from nothing, um and maybe you get very addicted to it and you want to improve more and more, and Um, and you find people find it some I see online, I see people finding it a lot more difficult than they thought it would be. And I think the fact that I had been through that phase already helped me a lot, and my expectations were more realistic. So in terms of what I did, that was the first thing was register for tournaments, start going to tournaments. Don't try to don't try to I hear people say I need to prepare before I can play tournaments, and I don't agree with that. I know you don't either.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been calling that the cave strategy, where
Yeah, yeah.
you go in a cave, you I guess become like perfect at chess,
Yeah.
and then you emerge and win all your games, right?
Yeah, and in my experience, there's a specific reason that doesn't work, and which is that you're not finding out what your weaknesses are when you're in the cave. You can read all the chess books in the world, but until you really put yourself to the test, in a serious game, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you're missing. And that was my experience. Um, and so I did that. Um, I quit Blitz for a while, which turned out to be bad, and I came back to it. I think that Blitz online Blitz was exercising, like, um, pattern recognition muscles that in my brain that, um, without I was, like, missing obvious stuff in classical games because I was just not in the practice of quick pattern recognition, which Blitz games had given me, so I came back to Blitz, um, and I yeah, I did a bunch of stuff. I mean, I watched a bunch of videos, I read some books, I watched some live events and stuff, and in the first year, I had some rating gains, and I got to, from the mid 1500s, I got to 1700 for the first time. Um, in that first year, uh, got into the 1800s in 2023, and then crossed 1900 for the first time at the end of 2023. Um, I at some point I started doing Anki flashcards, um, and got organized about opening study. Um, but I I don't really know what helped the most. And I have a couple of posts about this, and the one I wrote in 2024 was called something like 11 things I did to take my rating from 1540 something to 1970 something. And my attitude in writing that post was just, I'm gonna write down everything I did. I don't know which thing helped the most and which thing helped the least. There's not any way to know that. But I'll just say everything I did, and you know, it's a success story in a sense, and I I like to share it.
Yeah, and people should definitely check out that post. Really good one. I just learned this. I was listening to this guy Seth Perler, who calls himself like an executive function coach, and he has this word Frankenstudy, which is like Frankenstein, but he works with kids, like preparing them for school and stuff. So
Okay.
I like that word Frankenstudy. As it applies to chess, right? You've got 11 things. You don't know, really. Could be some of them are working, maybe some of them aren't. But I think a lot of people want like a silver bullet, right? But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
probably we should expect this sort of Frankenstudy. This, a lot of different things. You have to come at it from a lot of different angles. We probably shouldn't expect to be able to do one thing and get the results we want.
Yeah. Although if there was one thing that I think helped the most, it was fixing my time trouble problem. And I know this is your story also. But in that case, improving there was easy because I went from having no time management strategy whatsoever to it was very easy to improve on that. Um, and I got my time trouble problem under control. Started paying attention to the clock during the game, um, before it became a crisis, and that is, I think, it, that is advice that I think I can share pretty confidently. Is that if you're someone who's struggling to improve and you're either playing too fast or if you're playing too slow, either one, you should fix that problem before you work on anything else. Because if you're getting in time trouble, you're sabotaging everything you're trying to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's just like time management is like a massive sort of secret sauce for, often for people who do improve, make those rating gains later in life, because
Yeah.
I think there's often a bit of a tension between like what a lot of people get into chess for and what's interesting, and then what really wins chess games in a tournament setting. So it's like
Yeah.
no one
Yep.
gets into chess because they're like, I want to get really diligent about time management.
Right.
It's like you're given, whatever it is, 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, how you manage that will have a huge amount to say over how successful you are. And,
Yeah.
if you haven't put any thought into it or you don't have a strategy, you probably won't do a very good job at that.
Yeah. It comes naturally to some people, but um, it it clearly doesn't to others.
I am interested that you said for you that was a relatively easy fix. For some people, I think some people it's very difficult. They have
Yeah.
pretty deep psychological blockers that make it
Yeah.
really hard to fix. Sounds like for you, maybe it was just a matter of kind of realizing it was a thing and paying attention to it.
Yeah. It was a matter of I had gotten this strategy from Dan Heisman book to to divide the time control by 40, and that's your targeted average number of minutes per move. And I did that. I started writing down my clock time after every move, and not I write down the moves to refer to after the game is over. I write down the clock time to refer to during the game, so I can. That's the only way I can know how many minutes did I spend on the last move is if I have the previous time written down, and that would give me some feedback on am I hitting that target? If it's if it's a um, game in an hour and 20 minutes, then that's 2 minutes per move, I believe. 80 minutes divided by 40.
Yeah.
And um, and on every move, I can check was that move more than 2 minutes or was it less? And if it was more for a few moves in a row, then well, I'm going to need to make up for that. And so it is interesting to like that basically was enough for me. Once I started doing that, I was able to stick to it. And I do hear stories that for other people that's not enough. It They start doing that and they still have the perfectionism problem where they're on move 9 and they're deciding between two different quiet moves and they want to pick the perfect one and they spend 15 minutes on it. Um, even though they are aware of a targeted time frame. I seem to be able to avoid that problem.
Yeah. And you said you used it mostly for feedback during the game. I think it actually can also be really interesting after the game, because when
Oh,
you go
yes.
back and you look at those times, typically you find spots where you spent a really long time, and then after the game you're looking at it and you're like, this position, maybe it wasn't a critical position, maybe it wasn't really a difficult position.
Mhm.
You can, if you can sort of be honest and remember what you were thinking and get to the bottom of like what you were really struggling with,
Yeah.
that can highlight time management issues for sure, but also even like chess issues too, because it's like, maybe you were in a typical position for your opening, but you didn't know the plan.
Yeah.
Then you want to
Yeah.
fill in knowledge, or, maybe you had to calculate, but your calculation skills just weren't really working, right? It can be many different things,
Yeah.
but often those really long things point to something.
Yeah, and doing the 100 games of Blitz challenge in November, I having to decide on an interesting position during each game, it's a really big clue to look at the clock, look at which moves did I spend the most time on, um, which may or may not show up in the eval graph when you run it through the engine, because it may not have changed the eval very much, but um, that's a good that's a real good indicator about what's an interesting position.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well let's get into the sort of plateaus. You had this really exciting rapid growth, and then you kind of hit a period of where it was tougher. What, if anything, do you think changed at that point?
I mean, I think. Nothing changed about my routine. I have the same amount of time. I spend the same amount of time on chess that I have since the beginning of 2022 when I started taking it seriously. Um, my routine was while the rating was going up and while it was on the plateau, it was the um, daily opening study with Chessbook, flashcards and Anki. Both of those are on a spaced repetition schedule, so each app tells me what to review each day, and I complete all those reviews. Um, playing playing Blitz online, not any specific number of games, but whenever I have time, which is usually several games a day, and running every game through the engine and looking for flashcard material, basically, is what I'm doing
Maybe
when I'm.
maybe you could just I know flashcards isn't our main topic today, but
Yeah,
it's something that you're you're very like you really do.
I'm
Maybe
the
you could
I'm the
just
flashcard guy. Yeah,
really briefly sort of if people don't know what you mean by that or like what your system is.
yeah. So Anki, ANKI, is the app, and it's a general purpose app. It's not a chess app. It's actually most popular with medical students. For there's a ton of stuff you have to memorize in medical school, I guess. I have uh, I have one chess friend who is a medical student, and he uses Anki. He uses Anki for medicals. He doesn't use it for chess. He uses it for medical school, and he has something like 30,000 flashcards in there. Um, and he spends like 4 to 5 hours a day
Oh my
in
god.
this app, like doing his reviews, uh, which sounds crazy unless you understand how powerful this thing is, and then it makes perfect sense. It's a it's a tool for memorization. Um, it's a tool for remembering things. I mean, I think of memory as when you learn something, what happens next by default is you forget it. If you don't take steps to remember it, and if you aren't reminded of that thing on an ongoing basis, then you forget it. And so I sort of realized that as I was trying to get better at chess, and I saw people talking about Anki online somewhere, and I thought this sounds like it. This sounds like a good tool. Um, and it so the way I use it is I get a sort of a I play a blitz game, for example. I run the blitz game through the engine. The engine shows me my inaccuracies, mistakes, and blunders, and I find a position where the engine's explanation immediately makes sense to me. There are lots of positions where it takes some digging or it's some deep line that takes a lot of calculation. But I look for the ones that are relatively simple, and I'll screenshot that position. I'll put that in a flashcard, so that position becomes the front of the flashcard, and on the back, these are digital, so it's a metaphorical front and back of the flashcard. On the back is like, what's the best move and why? Uh, and in the theory, my theory is I'm finding these places from my own games where I didn't figure out the best move, but in retrospect, the best move should have been obvious because once the engine points it out to me, I immediately understand it. And so this is like laser targeted towards my gaps um, in my chess skill. These are the positions I played wrong but could have played right. And so then what the app does is it presents these on a spaced repetition schedule, which is it might be, for example, it'll show me the card twice on the first day, and then show it to me again 2 days later, and then 5 days after that. And I don't know the exact intervals, but it gets longer and longer and longer. And the upshot of all this is, for any given position, I can I can put it into my long term memory and keep it there for, like, let's say 2 years after reviewing the card a total of something like 11 times. And so it's just this insanely efficient tool for getting stuff into your brain. Uh, and and that's my attitude in creating these cards is the cards are cheap. I mean, it's the app is well, the iPhone app is in terms of money, it's $25 one time for the iPhone app. You can use it on your computer or on Android for free. But when I say cheap, I mean in terms of time. I err on the side of creating a flashcard anytime there's an interesting position because I over the course of the next several years, I am not going to spend a lot of time on that card. It's going to be a small investment of effort to permanently learn the lesson of this position, and so that's why I'm motivated to do it because it works. Uh, the system is it's such an ingenious system. It makes you incredibly efficient at remembering stuff.
Yeah, I would say efficiency is one huge selling point, and also the element of choice that you get to choose what to remember and not
Yeah,
leave it to chance. You know, so that is
yeah,
it is I always find it a bit odd how many chess players seem to really highlight remembering their openings as the thing they struggle with. They're like, this is the easiest thing. You know, it's like
yeah,
if you just do the spaced repetition, it really works. It's really efficient. So, you know, the problem unfortunately is that memorizing opening lines probably won't improve your chess results all that much, but it's very easy. Um, so it's just
right.
I was finding it a little bit odd. You know, people are like, "Oh, the thing I really struggle with in chess is remembering my opening lines." It's like, well, that's one of the easiest things, but unfortunately, it's not really one of the most important things. But it's just,
Yeah,
it's like that's not the biggest problem you've got.
that's talk about psychological issues. I think it's the temptation. There's a temptation because you can play the opening like a grandmaster, and you if you just memorize some stuff, you can't play the middle game like a grandmaster. So,
But also, you're probably that grandmasterly opening prep is going to be somewhat brittle, perhaps. And that, you can remember some
yeah,
lines, but if they do something different or the line
right.
extends, you might have a problem.
Yes, yes, of course.
Uh, it,
So Constantine asks, one can do that on Chessable too. Yes, um, you can do a custom course on Chessable. My friend Luca, who's in the chat, I think he has a bunch of he has a custom Chessable course where he puts his lessons that he learns from his games. Um, and that's it's a different user interface, but I think it's also spaced repetition, and I think it's there are pluses and minuses, but using either of them is better than nothing, I think, and I think it's the spaced repetition is really it's really magic, and that's what I really believe in, whether it's Chessable or Chessbook or Anki.
okay, great. So yeah, so that's the flashcards. You know, good technique for people to try. Okay, so you sort of entered into this plateau. Did it affect your enjoyment or excitement for chess that like you had been seeing these pretty consistent? The number goes. It's sort of it's fun to see the number go up, right? Did that
Yeah.
dampen your enthusiasm at all?
It didn't because I kind of expected it. I mean, I expected a plateau. I got a lot farther than I was expecting. When I started out in the 1500s, I thought, I thought I could probably get to, I could surely get to 1600. I could probably get to 1700. Uh, 1800 seemed like a stretch goal, and 1900 seemed impossible. Um, but my rating kept going up, and I got to into the 1900s, um, and I was so thrilled with that my attitude was like, if I'm stuck on a plateau for like 5 years, I'll be okay with that.
You sort of felt like you were playing with house money, and
Oh yeah, yeah, totally.
it reminds me. I've been doing this strength training program called Starting Strength.
Oh yeah, I've been meaning to
Yeah.
start strength training also.
Um, but they start you out on this thing called the linear progression,
Okay.
which is basically just you're doing a handful of basic lifts. You're doing pretty much the same thing every day, and you just add 5 pounds every time. And if you're a healthy person, you can keep going with that for a while. It's very simple, and it's kind of fun because it's just like you're getting
Oh
stronger.
yeah,
The numbers are going up every time, and then
yeah.
at some point, you can't just keep adding 5 pounds every
Right.
session ever. You have to the sort of the programming has to become more complex. You sort of have to back off at times. I'm actually
Yeah.
that's like I've been doing it for 3 months, and that's sort of the point where it's like I'm starting to fail on some of the lifts, and it's like I can't just max it out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've had that I have never done strength training in an organized way, but, um, I've done running, and what I started running, um, about 10 years ago, and what really motivated me at the start was I kept on improving, like, I kept on getting faster, and every day I went for a run, I was super motivated to do it because I couldn't wait to find out. Most days I was running faster than I ever run before. I couldn't wait to find out. It's like I made a Google spreadsheet with a scatter plot, and it was just super motivating to put another dot on that graph. And um, yeah,
So that so when it started to get more difficult to add those rating points,
yeah.
was there any sort of thought of like I need to change the plan, or did you feel like this works? I just need to keep sticking with it.
Um, I it was the latter, very much the latter. I did not. Um, I have not ever thought that I need to change the plan. Um, and it's been it was 2 years ago this month actually that I got 1900 for the first time, and so maybe it's time to reevaluate that, uh, because a plateau for 2 years is that's a more significant amount of time, um, but I I keep on here's what's happening though, I keep on losing games in incredibly stupid ways. So, uh, I the reason that makes me think I don't need to change anything is I look at that and I think, "Well, I just need to not do that anymore." And I don't need to, like, get more sophisticated in my training. I just need to not hang my queen, you know?
Did that change at all? Like when you were sort of more on the way up, do you feel like were you making fewer of those type of blunders? Do you think?
I must have been. It's I don't have a great metric for that, and I don't know how you would design a like, that would be an interesting metric to have, like, how many times do you hang your queen?
Well, I
But
mean, blunder rate. You could,
yeah,
that's not necessarily something you get out of the box with like engines, but you could create that.
yeah, that would be interesting to play with. But of course, that's affected by are you playing complicated openings or are you playing simple openings? Like it has the same issues the accuracy score has. Um, so, but that might be uh, an interesting metric to look at. But I did have the when I started um, in early 2022. I'm playing in my first chess tournaments in many years, and I played against a 1900. I was 1500 and I lost. And I went over the game with him afterwards, and I was surprised to find out that he didn't actually have any deeper understanding of the position than I did. Um, I just, like, blundered the game away, and because I was 1500 and he was 1900, that was the kind of the difference between us was that my blunder I was much more likely to be the first person to blunder the game away, and so,
The
uh
blunderer versus blunderee.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something a lot of people misunderstand about chess is they sort of say like, "Oh, I was even or slightly better for 30 moves, and then I blundered." Like, I was so unlucky. But it's like, well, that's really how most chess games go.
right, yeah,
That's a much more common sort of game than like one person just outplays the others like 0.1 centipawns at a time.
yeah, yeah,
Move by move over 30 moves.
yeah, totally.
John asked, did your balance between easy tactics and calculation change? So, actually, I'm not sure if you were really doing calculation
Yeah, I was
training.
gonna say, it didn't change because I didn't, have any, um I did I'll do tactics sometimes, but not in any organized, um not in an organized way. Didn't spend a lot of time on that. I think that my calculation practice I got a lot of calculation practice, it was because I was playing a lot of classical games. I played, uh, uh unfortunately, so the USCF has this new website, which is mostly good, except unfortunately their stats section has been down for several weeks, so I can't actually see right now how many games I played in each calendar year. But I played like 60 or 70 games in 22 and 23. And I played, I'm pretty sure over 80 games in 2024 and 2025. And so I'm spending a lot of time playing chess. I'm doing a lot of calculating, and that's where my calculation practice was. So no, it didn't change.
Yeah, I mean, I do think over the board is probably the best calculation practice because you're highly motivated. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, if you were to change something, and I'm not at all sure that you need to or should,
yeah,
but that could be something to look at. I just did
yeah,
this the podcast with Jakob Agard. We were talking about doing tactics, doing puzzles, and it seems like one of the biggest things that can change as you move up the rating ladder is going from easy to hard. Because I mean, we talked about this a lot, but what Jakob said, and this agrees with my own coaching and my own experience, is like up to a certain point, you really are going to have the best results doing easy tactics. And it's honestly, it's very hard to even really work on calculation unless your pattern recognition is already very good, because
yeah,
calculations, it's all about like organizing your thoughts, right, in these more complex ways. If you can't spot the obvious things, like there's nothing to organize. It's all just like kind of a jumble anyway. Um, but I have found that 1600, 1800, getting up into that 2000 range, that's kind of where you can start working on more difficult calculation, and it might be relevant.
yeah, yeah. Anytime this topic comes up, I'd like to recommend this post by Sam Asaka on calculation versus pattern recognition, where um, this is a Substack post from earlier this year, and he says like pattern recognition is like it's the basis for calculation,
Mhm.
and he said you can't. There's this saying you can't outrun a bad diet. Well, you can't outcalculate bad pattern recognition. You need the pattern recognition is like that's a component of the calculation, so
Yeah.
you've got to get that solid.
It,
And
you know, it really, like
yeah,
something I do a lot with coaching is I'll have someone talk through their thought process out loud, and you can really see exactly what you're talking about, because if you have like a really strong player like a grandmaster talk through their thought process out loud, all the moves they're saying make sense.
yeah,
Sometimes they'll make a mistake, but it all makes sense. Whereas often with a weaker player, they'll say a bunch of moves, but they're kind of, sometimes they can just be gibberish. They'll rattle off this line, and you're like, well, on move 2, you hung your queen.
yeah,
Move 3 was illegal. And it's sort of like, it's just, unless you have that pattern recognition
yeah,
automatically generating the reasonable moves,
yeah,
you can't organize them.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's sort of it's a shortcut of the where the GM every s every step, every ply of the calculation the GM makes, they just see a bunch of stuff. Um, you know, with they recognize a bunch of patterns.
um, another thing that we've talked about that I think people don't understand is like there is actually a fair bit of variance in the ratings, right? As far as people think of chess as having no luck or very little luck, but
Yeah,
you if you look at anyone's graph over time, it's like jagged, right? It has ups and downs. They're not always super meaningful.
right, and that's true in that's what the rating system is good. How do I wanna say this? The rating system overall is very good and works, and I do wanna get into why I believe that. Um, the its weakness, though, is a lack of precision. When you reach a peak rating, um, when you reach a peak Todd Bryant posted this meme a while ago, and it stuck in my head because it was so true. He said, "When you reach a new peak rating, you are usually 100 points overrated." Um, and that's, And that's yeah, that's true. It's because of, your graph was going like this, and then it's like it hit a high point, and now it's going to go back. It's going to go back down again because your
You
true
know,
strength is down here.
there's a famous. I think this is from Thinking Fast and Slow, but there's a story about these flight instructors when someone did a really bad performance on a flight, they would really reprimand them harshly, right? So they came to believe that like this kind of very hostile or like aggressive style of coaching was effective. But maybe it was just regression to the mean. Like if you do your worst flight ever,
Yeah,
probably next flight you're going to do better, whether or
yeah,
not somebody just yelled at you. If you hit your
yeah,
highest rating ever, probably just sort of statistically it might go down a bit.
yeah, yep,
Not based on any like deep psychological reason, but just like you've got a reading that's a combination of luck and skill.
yep,
When you get a really high reading, like maybe the luck is a little bit on the upside.
yep, yep. And in fact, it almost certainly is. Yeah. Mm.
There was a Constantine was asking, how do you recommend training pattern recognition? Jakob's suggestion, which I think is really smart, is you can do, if you're using Lee chess, for instance, you can set it to -300 or even -600 and turn
Yeah,
off rating so it'll stop adjusting. That just forces it to give you the easy ones over and over, which for pattern recognition is actually what you want. It's actually, if you just use all the default settings, it'll try to give you like the hardest puzzle that you could just solve.
yep,
That's too hard for pattern recognition. That's more of like a calculation type training.
yeah, yeah. That's a good idea. I think the flashcards are a good tool for that also, because often in the system I use that I described, I run the game through the engine, and the engine points out a mistake or a blunder, um, and it's just a matter of pattern recognition. I look at it and it's like slap my forehead and think, "Why did I miss that?" Um, but I did miss it, and so, there's a pattern that I need to get better at recognizing.
There is even if you look at the psychology research on chess, there's this idea of like chunks, right? So there's which
Mhm.
are these patterns that you learn.
Yeah,
And when they've studied this, they do find that, IMs and GMs have far more of these than the average player. So there is some sort of basis that, just learning more and more of these patterns is actually like a big part of chess skill.
yep.
I'm constantly also asking about the woodpecker method. Have you ever done the woodpecker method?
No, so that's like the woodpecker method is like inverted spaced
Yeah.
repetition,
The
right?
relationship to spaced repetition is kind of interesting.
It's like you go through the the puzzles until you can do the entire book in one horrific day where you spend 16 hours doing chess puzzles or something.
Exactly. So spaced repetition is repetition increasing intervals. The
Yeah,
woodpecker method is repetition decreasing intervals. It's an interesting context because spaced repetition is used everywhere outside of chess.
yeah,
A lot of like a big evidence base, it's really been studied. Woodpecker method, as far as I know, I haven't really seen woodpecker method outside of chess. It's sort of something
yeah,
several chess players stumbled onto. Some people, have had good results with it. I mean, I guess the idea behind it is by accelerating it, you're establishing some sort of mastery. Um,
yeah,
Personally, I don't find the theory behind it super convincing, but I would say like the best tactics are the ones you actually do. So for people who, the
mhm,
woodpecker method is motivating or they'll stick with it, it's like I don't know that you're getting anything special by repeating the same problems at an accelerating interval.
yeah,
As long as you're doing them, you're
right.
doing something and it's probably going to be helpful.
Yeah, and so is the woodpecker method. You do that, you get through the whole book in one day. What do you do then? How do you move forward from
I
that?
guess
What is the
you move
plan?
on with your life. Maybe you move on to a different problem set or something.
Or maybe you pick a different board game and, woodpecker that one.
Um, yeah, although that is another thing that's maybe a bit odd about it because with um, spaced repetition, you're sort of setting yourself up to have this
Right.
knowledge for life.
Yeah.
It's sort of like woodpecker, you kind of go nuts on it and then forget about it, I guess. I mean, I guess the hope would be that those patterns are so deeply ingrained, you sort of have that with you, I guess.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know, and I wonder how many people have actually done that, where they did the whole book. It sounds so unpleasant to me.
Yeah, I don't know how many people do the full thing of like the whole thing in one day. I mean, I guess
Yeah,
uh they follow some sort of accelerating timeline. I don't know how many people actually get to like the full 1 day thing.
yeah,
Yeah, Kyle's saying there's just high quality puzzles and there's sort of the answer you're practicing quickly calculating. I think to me it does feel like there's a bit of a risk in that if you just straight up remember the answer,
yeah,
not ideal if what you're trying to practice is calculating. Um,
right. And it's not easy puzzles. It's not pattern recognition. So,
um, but yeah, maybe
but anyway, and that's a topic for another day, probably with someone who knows more about it than me.
um, right. So at this point, what's the next step? Are you sort of carry on with the plan? I mean, you were telling me a bit about some tournaments you have planned.
Yeah, I I wish that the USCF website was there. The statistics section was working, and I could see how many games I've played so far this year. Because I was going to be close to 100, and I don't know if I need to like put my foot on the gas for the rest of December to make that happen. But um, I'm gonna, yeah, I play every Wednesday night at Triangle Chess. I play a lot of. There's another chess center near me in the Raleigh Durham area called Dragon Night that has tournaments every Sunday. I go to a lot of those. I go to Charlotte 3 or 4 times a year to Charlotte Chess Center events. I used to go more back when there was not anything going on near here. That's the best chess around for sure. Um, and I travel. I'm going to the Reykjavik Open next year. I'm going to Amateur Team East in New Jersey, at least, and probably many more. So I'm continuing to play. That's the biggest, most important thing. And I don't have any plans to change anything I'm doing. I'm learning new openings all the time because I enjoy it, not because I think it necessarily helps with chess improvement. But um, yeah, I
So
mean,
one
like,
one little bonus of the efficiency of spaced repetition is in terms of openings is if you actually keep all of those in chessbook or whatever repetition system, you can in theory be ready to play a lot of openings at any given time
yeah.
without a huge time investment, which you know I think targeted preparation, opponents looking up your stuff is sort of overrated in general. But
Yeah.
if you are in something like a local metagame where you're playing the same players over and over, it might be useful to be able to pull out different openings at different.
Yeah, and that's my, um, my theory. My goal is to become unpredictable. Um, I created my Chess and Chess.com accounts years ago under my own name. I was unfamiliar with the concept of targeted prep, and and then I find out that like you go to tournaments and people Google your name and they prep for you, and that some people's solution to this is to create multiple accounts on sites under secret names, and I just was like, I hate that idea. I hate that. I'm not creating a separate account. What my solution is going to be, I continue to play it under my own name, but I'm going to become unpredictable, and you don't know what opening I'm going to play. I don't know what opening I'm going to play until I
Yeah, well,
start.
probably maybe like the game theory optimal thing to do would be like you have this repertoire and like before the game, you fire up a random number generator on your computer. It's like,
Yeah,
0 to 1. It's like, okay, 0 to 0.2, I play the French. Like point 2 to point 9, the Sicilian point, whatever. I don't know if anyone actually does this. This is actually, this is kind of how poker players think. I don't think
yeah.
players are really like on that page exactly for
I
this.
I did do this for a month or so earlier this year. Is I looked at the time, and if the time was between 0 and 15 minutes after the hour, I played one opening. It was 16
You can even
to
like
30.
this is
Yeah,
actually something some people do in poker is like use the second hand on the watch to read.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
But again, maybe in chess you have like, well, first of all, like it's really not that easy for people to prepare for you anyway. But
Yeah,
also there's sort of other factors you might consider, like what opening would make my opponent like if you have a sense of your opponent's style or their strengths and weaknesses,
yeah,
you might have a sense that they would be like susceptible to some one opening or type of game.
yeah.
I think we also had John Luca was asking thoughts on positional versus tactical puzzles.
Um, do I have any thoughts on those? I think they're both good. I think they could both be uh, helpful. And like chess is complicated. Chess is vast. There's a lot of a lot of things. A lot of things help. Um, so, and doing a wide variety of things helps.
I am a fan of puzzle books or source, wherever you get your puzzles that are like mixed in some sense. You don't know what's coming. So for
Yeah,
example, like Practical Chess Exercises by Ray Chang is one of the books that I find myself recommending a lot. And it's a mix of all sorts of different positions. And I think generally that's good. In a chess game, you don't know in advance what type of problem you're facing. So one of the biggest challenges is to sort of understand the type of situation you're in, the kind of solution you're looking for. Um,
yeah,
if you know in advance, every position you're looking at has a winning combination, it's already giving you a lot of information you wouldn't have in a game. So like
yeah,
that kind of training can still be valuable, but it's like once you've gotten good at combinations, I think it's going to be more helpful to sort of have those mixed in with other type of things to make it more realistic.
yep,
Um, there's some reason they call that like in the research they call that interleaving when things are mixed up, and
yep,
there seems to be some evidence that is more effective than what they call blocked practice, where things are separated and you know in advance always what you're going to do.
yeah.
Constantine asks when is Reykjavik in May? I don't know.
It's March 25th to 31st.
Yeah, so this is a tournament in Iceland, which I've never been to, but it is, it's considered. I feel like it's like there's a certain number of like bucket list tournaments in the chess world, and
Yeah,
it'd be on a lot of people's lists.
yeah.
Uh, if you can make it to Iceland for 2 weeks,
It's
you know,
uh, it's not quite 2 weeks, but it's
nine
what? Yeah,
nine days, yes, or something like that.
it's a lot. Yeah, it's a long trip. It'll be some time off work and time away from my family, but it's I really wanted to do it once, and it was actually Luca in the chat who said, "Let's do it this year." So he's going to, and we're
Oh, awesome.
yeah. Um, on back on the topic of rating plateaus, there were a couple of things I wanted to get to that are not about my experience, but about other other things I've observed. I wanted to comment on the rating system because when we're talking about plateaus, we're talking about ratings, and I think there's sometimes you hear, well, my rating's on a plateau, but that's because the rating system doesn't work. The rating system is broken. There's ratings deflation, um, and I don't I don't agree with that. I think that the rating system basically works, and for the USCF and FIDE at least, they have ratings committees, which are in the case of the USCF at least is there are these mathematicians and statisticians who, from what I can tell, the same people have been on the committee for like 40 years. And they what they do is they monitor the system for signs of inflation and deflation, and they make adjustments. And they've made two of these adjustments in the past 2 years, one in 2023 and one in earlier this year, where they had detected signs of ratings deflation in the system, and they changed a parameter that goes into the rating calculation to the bonus points calculation, which it's very complicated math formula, but to make a long story short, that it makes it so that people's ratings go up faster when they prove that they are underrated. Um, and so I think that that's sort of underlying this whole discussion about ratings plateaus is, does the rating system work? Um, FIDE also has ratings. committee. Their adjustments seem um, a little more clunky, but they do make adjustments. They did that 1,000 to 1,400 thing a couple of years
Yeah,
ago.
that was sort of the famous one that got a lot of attention.
Yeah, but they're doing chess.com changes people's they change everyone's ratings once in a while. Um, Lead Chess hasn't done it in a long time from what I could find out, but there are I don't know if most people realize this, that people are monitoring the rating system and are making adjustments, and so if you think there's if you think there's deflation, you might be right, but you should reckon with um, the specific things that these ratings keepers have done to try to address that problem. Um,
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are convinced they're underrated or like their whole local community is
yeah,
underrated. And well, clearly they can't all be right.
you're going right.
I
Yeah,
mean, I think that the thing about Indian players being underrated, that did really seem to be extremely true.
yeah,
Uh, but if you don't live in India or one of, a small number of other people say like Kazakhstan, maybe there's a few other places, but
yeah,
for most people, yeah, I would agree with you. Like the rating system works pretty well. So, if you don't like what's happening to your rating, it probably has more to do with, there's the variance element, but if it's going on for a long time, it's probably essentially pretty accurate.
yep, yep. And so I also want to talk about Michael C. Johnson, who's I consider the greatest adult improver of all time, because his story of rating gains is a story of rating plateaus. Um, his story. This is a guy who lives in Kentucky. Of his USCF rating, he was a total beginner at age 37, and um, he over the course of his first 3 years, I have his ratings graph in front of me. Over his first 3 years, he worked his way up to about 1,500. Then he was on a plateau at 1,500 for about a year. Uh, Shot up to 1,700, like all at once. All of a sudden, he was 1,700. Um, s- Stayed on that plateau for about 4 years. Then gradually, over the next 2 years, worked his way up to 2,000. Um, when he hit 2,000, it was another 8 years after that that he reached his peak rating of 2135. He crossed 2,100 for the first time and reached a peak rating of 2,135. And I in his I guess he's in his 50s at this point because he was 37 when he started. And I bring this up for a few reasons. One, because um, those are long plateaus.
Mm.
This is a story of ratings gains, but it's the story of someone who stuck to it and kept on playing while his rating was in the 1700s for 4 years, or was in the 2000s, or even dipped down into the 1900s after he first reached 2000 for 8 years before he finally got to 2100. Um, and so I think it illustrates uh, a couple of things. Number one, rating plateaus are the norm. That if you meet when you meet a chess player who's trying to improve, odds are they are currently on a plateau. And even if you meet the guy who's the greatest adult improver of all time, somewhere along his journey of ratings gains, even he's probably on a plateau, that a multi-year plateau at that time. Um, and and two, because it illustrates that this is kind of what feeds my belief. The rating gains don't happen on a schedule and don't happen in a predictable way. And and so we've both talked about ratings goals. Um, and and it's when I look at data like this, and I I think here's someone who and this is a familiar story. It's not just him. It's also my ratings graph. It's like I look at a lot of people's ratings graphs and see the same thing. You're on a plateau for a long time, and then all of a sudden you jump up, and I don't think anyone ever sees it coming. It happens uh, really unpredictably, and And so that's where my belief comes from, that uh, rating goals can be good, but time-based rating goals um, are hard to set to at least.
Yeah, I would agree that that's compelling evidence. So maybe we're getting close to the top of the hour. So, if there are other questions, feel free to type them into the chat. One, while people are doing that, one that I just occurred to me, like, so empirically, we know plateaus are the norm. Like that's very clear.
Yeah,
Do you have any sort of theory about like what's going on under the hood in a plateau? Like what causes the plateau and then what finally causes the improvement? Like what's going on there?
I do. I thanks for setting me up for that. I have a half baked metaphor for you. Um, I have not written up a post about this, but maybe give me some feedback. Maybe I'll turn it into a Substack post. Um, I call it the log jam theory of ratings gains. So you know what a log jam is? It's when a bunch of logs come together in a river, and some logs get jammed against the bank of the river, and the whole thing stops. I mean, the river flows under the logs, but the logs all stop. And so, in this metaphor, if you bear with me for a minute, the ratings gains are represented by the free flowing river, the free flowing logs. Um, and when the logs get jammed, that's when you're on a plateau. And so to get the river flowing again, you can remove a log, which represents learning something new or improving your skill, improving your calculation skill, or learning a new strategy, or learning how to win the Lucina position, um, or something like that. And does it immediately free up all the logs? Well, probably not. Does it immediately make your rating go up? It probably doesn't. In order to do that, you have to remove enough of the logs, uh, and you don't know how many it is to get it moving again.
So
Um,
in the metaphor, the logs are things that are blocking your progress.
right. If you get the log out of the log jam, then you've learned something new, and you've gotten one piece of the log jam out, but the logs are still jammed. Or they might be. Eventually, they come free because you get enough of them out of there. Importantly, logs can come back. Logs can come in to the back of the log jam, and that represents forgetting things, which can happen. Is sort of a I think some the ways people talk about chess improvement, it's like you just accumulate more and more knowledge, but it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you forget stuff, and so
Mm.
um, I don't know. Tell me if you think this is worth a blog post, or if this is
But I mean, I think I'm very interested in this idea of like, what's happening in plateaus, what's happening when you get past the plateau. Like, is there any way that's predictable? Um, I think, it's an intriguing start. I have to admit, I'm not, I'm still not 110% clear on what the logs are in the metaphor.
what the logs are. So the log is a log in the log jam is something that you don't know.
Uh,
It's like a lack of knowledge or a lack of skill. And then when it's free flowing down the river, it's a skill
so
that you've mastered, or
like
it's
incorporated into your
yeah,
game.
yeah,
Yeah. I think, well, yeah, if you thought like, I saw, I do think you saw this in the sort of miniaturized version in the Blitz challenge that we just completed.
yeah,
That
I think so.
for not everyone saw tangible progress, but of the people who did, it was not generally just one game after the next, getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better.
Mhm.
The typical progress stories seem to be a bunch of games with no tangible improvement, and then suddenly something clicks.
Yeah,
Actually, that sort of happened for I was kind of starting from not my all-time high rating, so arguably I didn't have to become like a fundamentally better chess player to improve my blitz results, but I
yeah,
did. Um, I was starting out at a rating, and I was struggling to beat the players, and then after about 50 games, I suddenly had this feeling of like these guys are all terrible. Like why was it so hard for me to beat these guys? They're just blundering every move. Um,
yeah,
so I think that is often how improvement feels, and
yeah,
I think where probably a lot of people go wrong is they just don't stick with the process for long enough.
yeah,
Because maybe they're expecting to see that tangible improvement on a day by day or week by week basis, but that's
Yeah,
usually
totally.
not what you see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, time management is a good example of a log that you can, um, that you can remove, and it actually and that might unjam everything because you unlock a lot of, you get your time trouble problem under control, you unlock a lot of other stuff you've been working on.
And it's also, when you're talking about chess knowledge, like, the Lucena position doesn't happen that often.
Right, right.
If you have a time management problem, especially if it's really severe,
That's
you can
every
actually be
game.
sabotaging yourself brutally in every game.
Yep,
Uh,
yep,
that can make a big difference.
yeah, totally.
Um, all right, Dan, any last thoughts before we call it a night for tonight?
No, Nate, well, I wanted to say it's great to have you back. I'm glad you're feeling better. Your health problems you took, proved. I have a backlog of Nate Solon posts to read, which
They're coming fast and furious these days.
yeah, I it's yeah, it's good to have you back. I hope to see you at a tournament. I know you. I don't expect to see you in Parsippany because I know you hate that one, but
that's
maybe
that's my
maybe in
harsh limit
Charlotte.
now, even more so than it used to be.
What'd you
Um,
say?
oh, I just think, well, like, that was actually, um, at that tournament was where I initially got sick. I mean,
Yeah,
not really, because I had an underlying condition that had nothing to do with that. Uh,
right.
but
You you
psychologically, yeah.
You've also got COVID. You also got COVID on the way to the Charlotte Open, I think. Was it that year or the
Yeah,
year before?
I totally forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah.
I got off, yeah. Well, anyway, but yeah, hopefully I'll get back to some tournaments in 2026.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, everyone should, Dan's newsletter on Substack, Chess Improvement Lab, definitely subscribe to him and subscribe to that. Is there, any other projects or any other places where people should look out for you?
No, social media is so fragmented.
Mm.
Twitter was so good. It was so good, 3 years ago, and, changed so much.
I
But
I quit Twitter for like 8 months, and I've been back to it for like a month, and it is like it's like wading through toxic sewage. It's like you really feel the burn, like, but I don't know. For the moment, I'm kind of sticking with it.
yeah, I may go back to it. I've been away from it for about a year now, but I'm on I'm on Substack, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm in a bunch of different Discords. I'm for the time being not on Twitter, but, I may be in the future.
Right, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, and of course, my newsletter is Wish and Zug, so give that a subscribe. If not, next week we're actually it's a great follow up because next week we've got Todd Bryant
Yeah,
who's done some really interesting research on a lot of the same stuff we're talking about. Um,
yeah, super
a-
interesting.
Adult rating gains. He also talks about Michael John, the guy
Yeah,
you were talking about as like the goat adult improver. Uh,
yeah.
so we can kind of continue the discussion then. But for tonight, yeah, thank you again, Dan.
Thank you, Nate.
All right, have a great night.
You too.